Today, we're going to dive into the hidden story of economics and ethics. Now, you might think of these as two totally separate worlds, right? One's about money, the other's about morals. But as we're about to see, they've been tangled up together from the very beginning.
So let's start with the big question that really frames this whole explainer. Can the study of markets and money and all that stuff, can it ever truly be a value-free science? Completely separate from our ideas of what's right and what's wrong.
You see, economics kind of has this split personality. On one side, you've got the engineering approach. It's all about logistics. How do we get from point A to point B as efficiently as possible? But then there's this other side, the ethics-related view. And that one's asking a much, much bigger question. Where are we even trying to go? What's the destination? How should we live?
To really get this, we've got to rewind the clock, because for most of history, economics and moral philosophy, well, they weren't just dating, they were married. They were basically one and the same field of thought.
I mean, if you were to ask someone like Aristotle, he'd tell you that economics isn't just about piling up wealth. No way. The whole point of managing a household or a city, which is what economics originally meant, was to create a good life for everyone. The goal was fundamentally ethical.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because it busts a huge myth. We all think of Adam Smith as the guy who championed pure, cold self-interest. But get this, his first big book wasn't The Wealth of Nations. It was a book all about our moral feelings and our empathy for each other.
So, the takeaway here is crucial. Even for Adam Smith, the free market wasn't supposed to be some lawless free-for-all. He believed it could only work if the people in it were, well, good people, if they had virtues like honesty and fairness. The market needed a moral compass to function.
But then, something shifted. In the 19th and 20th centuries, economics went on this mission to become more like a hard science, like physics. And to pull that off, it attempted what we could call the Great Divorce, a total separation from ethics.
And the key to this whole project was the invention of a brand new kind of human, Homo economicus. Now, this isn't a real person. It's a simplified model, a little robot that's perfectly rational, only cares about itself, and is a genius at getting exactly what it wants. It made the math a lot cleaner, sure, but it also left out, most of what makes us human. And this led to a formal split down the middle. You had positive economics, which claimed to be the objective, just the fact science, like if you raise interest rates, inflation will probably go down. That's a positive statement. And then you had normative economics, the part that deals with our values, with what we should do, like we ought to raise taxes to pay for healthcare. That got shoved aside as, unscientific.
And here's the result. That big, grand goal of living a good life was swapped out for a super narrow technical target, economic efficiency. Specifically, something called Pareto optimality. Okay, imagine we're splitting a pizza. A Pareto optimal split is one where you can't give anyone a bigger slice without making someone else's slice smaller. It sounds fair, but it completely ignores whether one person started with 99% of the pizza and everyone else is just sharing the last slice. It has a total blind spot for fairness. Okay, so let's fast forward to today, because this is where that whole value-free foundation really starts to show some serious cracks. Reality, it turns out, just doesn't fit neatly into those simple models. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen just nailed it with this quote. He said that by trying to cut itself off from ethics, economics didn't just get more scientific, it became substantially impoverished. It lost its ability to understand the real world in a deep and meaningful way.
And the arguments against this value-free view are, well, they're pretty tough to ignore. First off, economics is a human activity, so how can it ever be truly value-free? And even the way we define rational is a value judgment. Plus, and this is wild, studies show that when you teach economics students that people are purely self-interested, they actually start acting more selfishly. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And of course, bias is just unavoidable when you're talking about money and power.
And it's not just theory. Modern experiments totally back this up. Real people, unlike our robot friend Homo economicus, care about fairness a lot. In lab games, people will choose to split money 50-50, even when they could easily take more for themselves. We're just not the simple little maximizing machines that the old models claimed we were.
So all of this has kicked off this really fascinating movement inside economics, an attempt to bring ethics back into the fold, to maybe, just maybe, end that great divorce.
You've got these new fields leading the charge. Behavioral economics brings psychology back in, admitting that we have biases and moral instincts. And then environmental economics forces us to ask these huge, long-term ethical questions, like what do we owe future generations? What do we owe people who aren't even born yet?
But this brings up another really tough question. Even if we as individuals try to be moral, can the market system itself actually translate those good intentions into good outcomes?
Well, there's this idea called the crowding out effect. It works in a couple of ways. First, for us as consumers, the cold logic of the market can kind of dilute our moral values. And second, for companies, really intense competition can actually punish the ethical ones. Think about it. A firm that pays to protect the environment might lose out to a competitor who cuts corners and is, well, less scrupulous.
Okay, let's pull back for a second and look at the big picture. Why does any of this hidden history of economics and ethics, why does it actually matter to you and me?
It matters because every single major policy debate we have, whether it's about climate change or inequality or healthcare, they're always presented to us as these dry, technical economic problems, but they're not. At their heart, they are always choices about our values. And just realizing that is the first step to having a much more honest conversation.
The famous economist John Maynard Keynes had this really profound insight. He believed that the point of a good economic policy isn't just to make us feel good or even just to make us richer. The ultimate goal is to design a system that encourages us to behave well, to be better people, better citizens.
And that really leaves us with the final question, doesn't it? Economics isn't some passive science that just describes the world as it is. It's a powerful tool we actively use to build the world we live in. So the choice we face isn't if we should use values in economics, it's which values we choose to build our world with.